Only one Taylor Sheridan show has a lower Rotten Tomatoes audience score than Landman, and it's one of his best series. The overwhelming majority of Taylor Sheridan's recent TV shows have been received favorably by critics, and Landman is no exception. The series has a 78% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes following the release of its first season on Paramount+, and most of the other shows that Taylor Sheridan has created score even more highly on the review aggregator site. On the other hand, there's a marked drop-off when it comes to audience reviews for Landman, as well as one other TV series developed by Sheridan. Landman has just a 62% score among audiences who've reviewed the show on Rotten Tomatoes, while 1923, Sheridan's Yellowstone prequel series, which premiered in 2022, has an even lower audience score of 53%. Ironically, among critics, 1923 is the most acclaimed show of Sheridan's entire career as a writer, producer, and actor. In particular, actors Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren have marked the series out for special praise, thanks to their charismatic performances at the center of 1923's all-star cast. Yet the show's audience simply hasn't bought into its story the way professional TV reviewers have. Likewise, Landman hasn't been as popular with audiences as it is with most TV critics, likely due to its focus on technical aspects of the oil business for much of its first season. The shocking turn of events at the end of Landman Season 1, which include the introduction of Andy Garcia's new villain Galeno, set up the prospect of a more entertaining second season for the show's audience. Ultimately, most viewers find the involvement of a Mexican-American drug cartel in a battle for control of Texan oil fields more intriguing than boardroom negotiations between oil companies and prospectors. Landman has still fared considerably better than 1923 in terms of audience ratings, though as the latter show is the only TV collaboration between Taylor Sheridan and Paramount to have received negative ratings in almost half of its audience reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Given that the series has cost over $30 million per episode to make, according to Sheridan himself, via Collider, this divided response among its viewership has probably left Paramount Plus bosses scratching their heads. With actors like Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren on board, and the precedents of Yellowstone, and 1883 behind it, the show ought to have been an unqualified success. As it is, 1923 Season 2 in particular has come in for a sizable backlash from its audience. Regardless of its status as the critical darling of Taylor Sheridan's TV career, 1923 has frustrated audiences with its slow pacing and its depiction of sexual violence. The positive aspects of the show highlighted by critics, such as its stunning cinematography and set designs, aren't of central importance to most viewers, who are more concerned with the action and characterization at the heart of the story. There's also a general feeling among viewers that Ford and Mirren have been underused as the show's star attractions, while 1923 Season 2 plots became too melodramatic for their own good. Now that the show has ended, retrospective viewings may result in more positive audience feedback in time, bringing its audience score more in line with the widespread critical praise it's received. At the same time, this can work as a warning against going down the same path with the follow-up season of Landman. Although the two shows are very different, there's a massive overlap between their respective viewerships and audience expectations. Taylor Sheridan doesn't miss. At least, that's what his loyal fan base has believed ever since Yellowstone rode into television history with cowboy swagger, Kevin Costner gravitas, and enough panoramic shots of Montana to make the state a bucket list destination. His grip on gritty American storytelling, whether it be the elite tension of Mayor of Kingstown, the cowboy code of 1883, or the neo-Western turmoil of Tulsa King, has made him a certified powerhouse. So when Landman debuted with Billy Bob Thornton at the helm, oil rigs spewing smoke against blood-red sunsets. The assumption was it would strike black gold. Instead, it struck lukewarm. The Rotten Tomatoes audience score hovered awkwardly in the mid-60s. Not abysmal, but surprising for Sheridan, whose work is usually greeted with standing ovations by viewers before critics can even click publish. But here's the twist. Landman isn't his lowest-rated show. That dubious honor belongs to a series many quietly, and some loudly, call his best, The Last Cowboy. Yes, the reality competition docuseries about the high-stakes world of professional reining, where cowboys guide horses through circles, spins, and sliding stops, has the lowest audience score of all Sheridan's creations. Even with Landman stalling in public reception, The Last Cowboy still sits lower. The irony. The Last Cowboy might be Sheridan's purest work. The underdog of the Sheridan-verse. The Last Cowboy didn't have big explosions or mafia intrigue. There were no train stations for enemies to disappear into. It had no Kevin Costner, no Sylvester Stallone, no gunfights in dusty towns. What it did have was dirt, horse sweat, muscle memory, the kind of discipline that can't be faked by actors in Stetsons. It was perhaps too real. Audiences accustomed to Sheridan's dramatized, high-octane storytelling were caught off guard. This wasn't 1883. This was 2020 in a barn with million-dollar horses and working-class riders laying it all on the line. The stakes were real. The competition was brutal. The storytelling was quiet, reverent, and deeply human. But sometimes authenticity doesn't play well with algorithms. The Last Cowboy fell victim to expectations. Viewers went in hoping for Dutton-esque drama. What they got was something better, but only if they were willing to see it. Why Landman struggled, but didn't fail. Landman carries a weighty pedigree. Based on the Boomtown podcast, it sought to explore the messy underworld of West Texas oil drilling. Billy Bob Thornton brought his signature charm meets menace energy, and the show looked phenomenal. But the narrative tried to drill into too many layers at once: corporate greed, environmental decay, broken families, geopolitical pressures. Where Sheridan's other shows often focused tightly on a family or an anti-hero, Landman sprawled. The oil industry isn't easy to digest. It's messy, metaphorical, and polarizing. And unlike Yellowstone, which sugarcoats rugged masculinity with sweeping romance, Landman was more cynical. There were fewer heroes and more moral quicksand. In other words, it's not that Landman is bad. It's just that it's heavy. And people expecting an oil-soaked Succession got something closer to There Will Be Blood, but serialized. But what makes The Last Cowboy so great? Here's where things get poetic. The Last Cowboy is the essence of Sheridan's work stripped bare. No fiction, no Hollywood. Just men and women trying to master an art most Americans have never even heard of: reining. In this world, cowboys train horses to perform intricate routines. The elegance of ballet meets the grit of rodeo. Sheridan, who has long been a competitor himself, didn't just create The Last Cowboy, he lives it. That authenticity seeps into every frame. You can feel the dirt under the nails, the heartbeats before a performance, the family pressure, the lifelong obsession with perfection. The series does what all great Sheridan shows do. It tells American stories. But these aren't fictional families on fictional ranches. These are real people risking everything for glory in an overlooked corner of Americana. The stakes are as high as any gunfight in Yellowstone. But here, it's not about life and death. It's about legacy. Sheridan's flawed masterpiece. There's a saying in the reining world: it takes a lifetime to train a horse to stop on a dime. Sheridan's own storytelling career mirrors that philosophy. The Last Cowboy wasn't designed to be a ratings juggernaut. It was a passion project, an ode, a love letter to the culture that birthed him. So when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes audience scores and see The Last Cowboy sitting at the bottom, you're not looking at failure. You're looking at misunderstanding, or maybe just a mismatch of audience and expectation. In that light, Landman and The Last Cowboy are kin. Both are heavier than they appear. Both are truer to the Sheridan soul than any streaming exec might prefer. And both, ironically, may age better than his bigger hits. Reevaluating the Sheridan legacy. It's easy to define a creator by their flashiest success. For Sheridan, that's Yellowstone, an empire now branching off into sequels, prequels, and soon spin-offs starring Matthew McConaughey and other A-list cowboys. But if you really want to understand what drives him, don't start there. Start with The Last Cowboy. Then watch Landman, and you'll see it. The connective tissue, the moral weight, the reverence for land and labor, the deeply American conflict between prosperity and pain. Sheridan isn't just telling cowboy stories. He's wrestling with what it means to be part of a nation built on paradox. So while Landman may stall in its premiere season, and The Last Cowboy may limp along in the ratings barn, the truth is clear. Some of Sheridan's best work is hidden just below the surface, where the oil and the honesty live. And if the audience scores don't reflect that, maybe they weren't supposed to.